Hey, welcome everybody to our third webinar. If this is your first time joining us, we're super glad to have you join us now. And for everybody who took the time to be with us tonight, thank you. So, for those of you who don't know, I am Carrie Flynn. I am the Education Director for the Genocide Education Project. I'm also a retired Missouri Social Studies and English teacher. And the Genocide Education Project was established 20 years ago to support educators through professional development, lessons, and resources as they teach about the Armenian Genocide. With me tonight from Gen Ed, as always, is Seda Agamians, our incredible administrator, and our special guest tonight, who is a very special guest, and it's a great honor to have him with us tonight, is Dr. Taner Akçam. So, we are very excited to be able to partner with the Promise Armenian Institute at UCLA for tonight's webinar. The Promise Armenian Institute is designed to be a hub for world-class research and teaching, not only in fields related to Armenian studies, but also for coordinating interdisciplinary research and public impact programs relevant to Armenia and Armenians at UCLA, the Republic of Armenia, and the diaspora. Our very esteemed guest tonight, Dr. Taner Akçam, is the inaugural director of the Armenian Genocide Research Program of the Promise Armenian Institute at UCLA. Previously, he was the Kalustyan and Mugar Chair in Modern Armenian History and Genocide at Strassler Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Clark University. Dr. Akçam is widely recognized as one of the first Turkish scholars to write extensively on the Ottoman Turkish genocide of the Armenians in the early 20th century. His latest book is entitled Killing Orders, Talat Pasha's Telegrams and the Armenian Genocide. He is the founder of the Krikor-Gregorian Online Archive, which is a collection of documents relating to perpetrators of the Armenian Genocide. So welcome, Dr. Akçam.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great pleasure really for me and to be here and to have the opportunity to speak on such an important topic. Let me share my screen. Replace current share and share my screen. And here is I think you all can see my screen. I have been asked to provide a general historical overview of Turkish denialism and its connection to the current Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict. And in my short presentation, I will attempt to shed light on the nature of denial in general, what is denialism, and the Turkish denialism in particular. So my talk will be divided into two major parts. In the first part, I will discuss some general characteristic of denial, how and why people deny historical facts, and more specifically, the key mechanism of Turkish denialism. So in the second part, I will attempt to answer the $1 million question everybody asks. I have been in this field more than 35 years, and each and every time people ask me the same question. Why does Turkey deny the Armenian genocide? So this will be the second part of my talk. By first exploring the broader phenomenon of genocide denial and focusing on the Turkish case, I hope to provide both historical context and analytical depth in the discussion. So as you see here from the first slide, I have actually four major arguments on denialism. Number one, denialism is a very modern phenomenon. Number two, denialism is an intrinsic part of Armenian genocide. So it was organized from the beginning, from its very start, as a legal act. I mean, Turkish government or Ottoman government is saying the truth. The entire deportation is or was a legal relocation plan or population relocation. So And the other important characteristic of this Turkish denialism, I'm going to talk about also the role of awareness of their own weakness. They knew that they were weak and they had to develop a special strategy in denialism. And the third central argument is denialism is not only an ideological attitude towards a past event, but also a structure, an institution. So I'll talk about it also. And denialism, the other very well-known issue is the relationship of denialism to truth. And we usually believe that the denialism is the denying of the factual truth, and I will argue against it and will say there is a very complicated relation between denialism and truth. We should know that. And so now for each point a little bit, state violence in mass scale, it was really not an aberration in history. In early times, even on mass scale, the violence was not only viewed as normal, but often the object of praise. Far from hiding it, political leaders have throughout much of recorded history mentioned such slaughter with pride on the monuments, and they have erected and inscripted they have left. They built awe-inspiring monuments to commemorate their victories over the enemies, which often involved the wholesale physical destruction of those enemies. So I have here a couple examples. I'm not going to read it, but these are the inscriptions from ancient kings, sultans, czars, and emperors. They were proud of what they were doing. For example, the Assyrian king Sennacherib said, I cut their throats like sheep. Or then another example, I fixed up a pile of corpses in front of the city gates and so on. They proudly wrote what they did. So in that sense, denial of mass atrocities was not a phenomenon in ancient history. It was a product of modern period. And it is the Enlightenment, actually. It was with the Enlightenment, the change of attitude towards violence we observed. While violence has remained a constant tool of statecraft to this day, the way it is conceived, presented, and carried out has evolved significantly. With the Enlightenment, we start to see the violence as an aberration, something that deviates from normal behavior, and we also consider it's morally reprehensible. Maybe until recently. Now, with the Trump's latest statements to Gaza, we might see really a change there, that the ancient attitude towards violence coming again in the discourse. So as a result, actually, with the modern period, the political entities no longer openly boast about violence and killing, but instead seek to justify if it when possible. And if justification is not feasible, to deny it outright. In modern statecraft, violence is rarely presented as an act of aggression. Rather, it is framed as a reluctant necessity, an unavoidable measure taken in the name of national security. What we hear in 20th century, beginning maybe 19th century, I can definitely talk about the Armenian case with the beginning of 20th century. Whatever they did was in name of national security and self-defense. And you hear this also today a lot when it comes to Ukraine or Israel. Whatever they did, they have done it in name of national security and self-defense. So this shift has made denialism as a structural component of genocidal action. The challenge of hiding the crime is now often considered even in the planning stages, not merely as an act afterwards, the genocide. So this is the case in Armenian genocide. Armenian genocide was not an exception. Special efforts were made to justify the violence, not as an act of extermination, but as an inevitable response to an existential threat. The state is under threat, and there is an existence problem here. And then when the justification was not sufficient, denial became a default mechanism. So in that sense, denialism has been an inherent component of the Armenian genocide. From the beginning, from the outset, denial was embedded in Armenian genocide and developed alongside the deportation and massacres. What you see here on the screen is the official Ottoman Gazette from the 1st June 1915. It is the deportation order. It says army commander has the right to relocate Armenians. They even don't use the term Armenians in these official orders. They are in charge to relocate the population that they considered from a national security perception, it is necessary to relocate them. So the entire organization, entire operation was organized as a legal relocation, and you can really find enough document in Ottoman archives that entire genocide was nothing but a legal relocation operation. But the other important factor that you should keep in mind, it was a key factor. They had to conceal these crimes because of their own weakness. They were dependent, especially to Germany during World War I. Ottomans relied heavily on German financial and political powers and military support from Germany. So they should not alienate and embarrass Berlin by openly supporting or carrying out genocide. So they should show a specific effort to conceal the genocidal effort. And not only because of dependence to Germany financially and militarily, there was another serious problem throughout the genocidal operation. There were foreign observers, German missionaries and military officials, and German consulars throughout the Ottoman Empire, and another important aspect, American consular representative, because America stayed neutral until the beginning of 1917, and American missionaries and American consular representatives were present throughout Anatolia. So when the massacres took place, Ottoman government needed to care special measures to conceal the entire operation, and they had to really portray everything was framed a wartime necessity, presented as the relocation of the population rather than a campaign of extermination or killing of the Armenians. So because of these characteristics, Ottoman government started organizing denialism with the very beginning of Armenian genocide. And in that sense, my argument is denialism is a structure. Today we have two major misunderstandings, and it is often seen as a merely, denialism is often seen basically as merely as a mistaken but tolerable ideological attitude towards a mass atrocities, and is assumed to be a moral issue concerning a single crime of the past. So to disconnect it from the present. So as if Armenian genocide denialism is something related to a mistaken attitude what happened in 1915, but only 1915, and it has no relation to current political development. I call it, temporal compartmentalization, the tendency to separate past and present, ignoring their interconnectedness, severing the link between denial in the past and contemporary political problems. This is really this severing the cut from past and present is deeply problematic. So my argument is denialism is not about rejecting the historical crimes, but it is a structure that continues to shape present day policies. So my argument or my suggestion to you, whenever you think on Turkish denialism, please compare it with the apartheid South Africa. So Turkish denialism built on discrimination and exclusion of ethnic religious minorities. And Turkish denialism works in two major ways. Domestically today, in the past it was the Armenian question, in the present it is the Kurdish question. So whatever Armenians represented in the past for Ottoman government, Kurds are representing today for Turkish government. It is the national security threat. And internationally, this denialism continues today in the presence of Armenia, Syria, and Greece. If you look Turkish government's attitude towards Armenian state and Syrian Kurds and the Greek government, the Greece, you will see the continuity in the pattern. In that sense, my argument is denialism is a structure and continues today and produce the same policies that it produced in the past towards Armenians. And today, Armenian state as such, and the Kurds domestically in Turkey, and Syrian Kurds in Syria, considered by Turkey as a national security threat, and Turkey's foreign policy based on this exclusion mechanism. It is in that sense really to compare with the South African apartheid regime. There is another important problem that we have with denialism. This is the denialism relation to the fact and truth. Denialism is often misunderstood merely as a rejection and established fact. The assumption is based on a belief that facts, opinions, and interpretations are distinct from each other. And then with truth emerging from the consensus over objective, undeniable established fact. However, denialism does not function this way. Instead, it operates in the blurred space between fact and truth, constructing its own facts and its own version of reality. I think in order to understand this, it's very crucial. Hannah Arendt's distinction between factual truth and rational truth, essential to understand this phenomenon. So Hannah Arendt argues that while truths in mathematics, truths in science, in philosophy, such as Euclidean geometry, or Einstein's theory of relativity, or Plato's philosophy, they represent certain truths, mathematical truth, scientific truth, philosophical truths. But if they deny, if they really erase from history, they can always be rediscovered, even if they are forgotten or denied. But factual truth does not have this resilience. Facts and events, even those most rigorously documented, are infinitely more fragile than theories, discoveries, and axioms. They emerged in the ever-changing realms of human affairs, and once lost, no rational effort can bring them back. Once factual truth is obliterated, it is almost impossible to reconstruct. So the moment of documents and testimonies that establish a fact are eliminated, the possibility of restoring it disappears. So since the historical facts that we talk today rely on mainly two pillars, official documents and witness testimonies, denialism has the power to undermine both. Witness account can be discredited. Counter testimonies can be fabricated easily. And an official record can be destroyed or doctored or replaced with alternative documents. So denialism in that sense is not denial of factual truth. It is really they create their own truth, their own fact also. So my argument here for you guys is struggle over which version of truth prevails is inherently political, because denialism has their own facts and their truth. And those in power determine what is remembered and what is erased. As a result, the fight against denialism is not only an academic endeavor, but also a political battle over historical memory and justice. And how they do that, how they denialism organize these. There is, he passed away a couple of years ago, Chicago anthropologist and historian Michel Rolfe Trullo. He wrote an excellent book on the silencing the past. And in his Silencing the Past book, he describes the mechanism, how ruling or the powers, those in power, how they silence the past. Or you can describe this, how they develop the truth for denialism. I'll give you a couple of examples for it. One is moment of creation, so the making of sources. Thinking of Armenian genocide, beginning of 1914 even, they planned to implement genocidal plans in 1914. They developed their own individual archival facts as really the description of what was going on the field. So the moment of creation, the individual acts, documents, I will give you a couple examples. And the moment of fact assembly. So they make their own archive that explains their own way of narrative. And the third stage, then they make the narrative. They develop, based on their individual facts and archives, they develop a kind of narrative. And then they claim that their making of history is the final instance, and this is the final historical truth for that. And I add one important point to explain the Armenian genocide. There was also in Armenian genocide a fifth element, fifth stage, the moment of destroying, because they had to create some materials and they had to destroy these archival materials that they created, and or they proving the falsity of the critical documents. I will give you a couple of examples for that, how it works. There remained some really original critical documents, and Ottoman government and Turkish governments were quote unquote successful to prove the falsity of these original documents. So Ottoman Turkish government, in order to underpin their denialist strategy, they developed three major operations. Number one, as I said, they create and assemble their own facts and archive. And second important stage, they hide or destroyed the main bulk of documentary evidence. I can share these slides later with you. There are certain instances what they hide, for example, during genocide, or destroy after the genocide. And second important, how they hide the genocidal materials. For example, today, there is no one single document related to a special organization, a paramilitary unit that organized the Armenian genocide. We know that from other sources. But in Ottoman archive, we don't have one single official document related to Teşkilat-ı Mahsusa, what is called, or special organization. Or today, CUP Central Committee. CUP is the party, Committee of Union and Progress. This is the party organized the Armenian genocide, and there is no files related to this party. It's gone. We don't know where they are about. They either totally destroyed or still hide. And some files of Interior Ministry, we don't know about them. We don't know their existence. Why? We know that some files of Turkish or Ottoman Interior Ministry non-existence today, or that they were exist and destroyed because of a military tribunal occurred in Istanbul between 1919 and 1921. When the First World War ended with Ottoman defeat, there was a new government. This was a new government started negotiating peace with Great Britain and France. And Great Britain and France made very clear to this new Ottoman government, if they want a positive peace result for them, they should do something for the Party of Union and Progress Party who organized the Armenian genocide. And the new Ottoman government in Istanbul established military tribunals in Istanbul. And there were trials, altogether 63 military tribunals in Istanbul. And around 200 defendants were tried in these courts. And 16 death penalty were handed over. And 3 were hanged. 3 Ottoman officials were hanged as a result of these military tribunals. And you can ask today, where are the documents related to these military tribunals, to these 63 court cases in Istanbul? Gone, evaporated. Today, we don't have any knowledge about these court materials. Only until 2015, I was able to find totally coincidentally some of these military materials. So I will give an example also. So then this was the strategy of Turkish government, hiding and destroying the main bulk of documentary evidence. And the other one, they deny the authenticity of some of available original documents. If I have time, I will give you some example. Here, one example for you. The moment of fact and archive creation. As you know, Armenian Genocide officially launched April 24, 1915. At that very day, in Istanbul, Ottoman government arrested around 200 Armenian intellectuals. These Armenian intellectuals were taken out of, they were arrested in Istanbul, and they were carried, all transferred to Ankara, today's capital city. There were two different prisons these intellectuals were put. And beginning of April 25th, when they arrived this prison, throughout the summer months, Ottoman government took the prisoners, these intellectuals, and they brought them to another city, Diyarbakir, southeast of Turkey, and on the way, these intellectuals were exterminated. We know that from different sources, or this is what we argue. Look, this is a document they created when they took out of this prison these Armenian intellectuals that I'm talking about. Some of them. They say, in that document, they say this Armenian intellectual, they escaped on their way. And we don't know whereabout these Armenians. This is official document from 1916, and it is still in Ottoman archive. And based on this kind of producing of document, Yusuf Sarınay, who was the director of the Ottoman archives when he wrote this article, he wrote an article about 155 Armenian intellectuals, and he claimed that none of them were exterminated. And based on Ottoman records from 1915, 1916, 35 of them were found innocent and returned to Istanbul. Only 29 were kept in one of these prisons. Or all the 3 foreigners, I mean the Armenian citizens of other countries, they were exiled from Ottoman Empire and sent to these cities, to these countries, based on their own records. So as you see, you find enough documents that explains another story. They created another truth based on their own archival materials. This is a very famous case, Krikor Zohrab. He was an Armenian intellectual, and he was killed June 20th, 1915. We coincidentally learned that Krikor Zohrab was killed by smashing his head by a stone, and it was done one of these special organizations members. The guy coincidentally talked too much about this event, and then it was known that he was killed by smashing his stone by a stone. But this is really coincidentally we learned about. Here, a doctor report, it says that Krikor Zohrab passed away because of cardiac problems. And you can think that this is a fabricated doctor report. This was not enough. This is the report testimony of Urfa, where the killing happened. Urfa priest, Armenian priest of Urfa, says, yes, Ottoman government took me to the place and I saw the body and I was told that Krikor Zohrab passed away because of a cardiac problem, heart problem. Even though his head was smashed, he was not able to report this in his testimony. But this is a testimony of an Armenian priest. What else you want? And third, this is a record from Interior Minister. It says that Krikor Zahrab was killed. I'm sorry, had died as a result of an accident. And during those time, in 1915 September, for example, there were newspaper coverages about Krikor Zahrab's passing away as a result of a cardiac problem. So you have the testimony of priests, you have testimonies, you have the official report, you have the newspaper articles, so you have your truth there. So in that sense, I'm telling you, the denialism is not only denying the factual truth that we claim, but denialism creates their own fact and their own truth. And the second example about the destruction, I don't know how this document really survived. This is a document from Ottoman archive, and the Interior Minister, after sending this document, says the destruction of this telegram with its copy in the telegram office is request of the Central Committee. So you have to destroy this telegram after receiving, says the Central Committee after sending this telegram to the region. So this is the way how they destroyed several documents. These are really three documents that we coincidentally discovered. Maybe they made this mistake. They didn't read the content of this document. This is the reason they put in the Ottoman archive. And at that time, they forgot to destroy. And in these documents, three documents, it says destroy after reading, destroy after reading. And guess what? To which topic was these three documents? They were all related to forcibly assimilating Armenians, girls and boys. So Ottoman government sends a circular to all provinces saying that forcibly assimilate Armenian kids, girls and children, generally boys and girls, and destroy after reading this document. Let me give you one last example related to hiding the documents. What you see on the screen is a page from official gazette. When the trials happened in 1919, in May 1919, Ottoman government published, this was an anti-unionist, I mean the Committee of Union and Progress that organized the genocide, and the government was in opposition to that party, and they held the trials in Istanbul. And one of the important trial was against the Central Committee members and the government of 1915. And we call it main indictment. And Ottoman government published these documents in official gazette. And in this official gazette, as you see on the right side of mine, I mean, I see on the right side, I think you see also on the right side, official gazette. And in this indictment, there are two really very crucial telegrams. One is belonged to a person whose name is Bahattin Shakir, and it says in this telegram, Bahattin Shakir, it is sometimes 1915 June, it was sent to a province. It says, are the Armenians being dispatched from there, from your province, being liquidated? Are these troublesome people you say you have expelled and dispersed being exterminated or just deported? Answer explicitly, because Bahattin Shakir was in charge of extermination the deportees, and he wanted to know whether the Armenians from that special province already exterminated or were sent to another place to be exterminated. He wanted to know that. And in second important telegram, it is from Third Army commander, who was in charge of entire Western Armenia or Eastern Anatolia, where the Armenians were deporting. What happened was, in the early stage of deportation, a lot of Muslims, they were good people and they had conscience, and they started hiding Armenians in their houses. And the Third Army commander sent a circular. It is again June 1915 around. And it says in this circular, those who have been hiding and maintaining Armenian in opposition to government orders be hanged in front of their properties, and their properties burned to the ground. These are citations from these telegrams, and they were quoted in the main tribunal. But denialist strategy was very simple. They argued with a simple argument. Show us the original. How do we know that these telegrams quoted in these main indictment original? You cannot show the original. And you think that this is only a government strategy? You are wrong. A scholar still alive in his maybe coming close his 100 years, this is the Günter Levy. He wrote a scholarly book. And as a scholar, of course, he should be very precise. And he says, since most important documents from the tribunals are not available, we cannot trust this main indictment and these citations. And this is his book, written very scholarly. He was not denying the massacres and what happened, but he was saying these massacres was outside of government control. And in 2005, he was invited to Turkey and given a medal by the Speaker of Parliament and by Turkish government. As you see, it was really how the denialism really was working. And it was really total coincidence that I discovered original of this document, as you see. How I discovered? Because Armenian Patriarchate was able to participate in the tribunal as representatives of the Armenians, and the presiding judge allowed them to make copies, and Armenian Patriarchate made the copies of this document, and these documents from Armenian Patriarchate copies was sent to first Manchester, from Manchester to Marseille, and it ended up in Jerusalem. Today, all these documents from 1921, military tribunals materials, they are in Jerusalem archive, Armenian Patriarchate archive. And Armenian Patriarchate was not allowing anybody, still today, to access in this archive. Coincidentally, a priest with the name Krikor Gergerian, because he was also priest, he was allowed to look in the Jerusalem archive. He copied these materials, and I was able to access Krikor Gergerian's archive 2015, 100 years of Armenian genocide. And then I was able to find the original. As you see, this is the original report from the court, and you see the same wording as it was in the main indictment. It is considered necessary that those who have been hiding and maintaining Armenian opposition to government orders be hanged in front of their properties and their properties burned to the ground. This is what they did actually. And this is the telegram that I'm talking about. As you see, the original Ottoman letterhead, also interior minister's letterhead, it says, are the Armenians being dispatched from there, being liquidated, and so on and so forth. As you see, Ottoman government and afterwards Turkish government were hiding the official Ottoman documents, and it was really totally coincidentally that I had access to these documents. This is the reason why Turkish government was able to develop its own fact and its own truth. And it is very difficult to prove that the truth is otherwise, because you have to find your own facts, you have to develop your own factual truths, and then it is a political struggle between political powers which truth is the factual truth. This is what Hannah Arendt talking about, because factual truth, which is related to historical facts, is easily be eradicated, and it is very difficult when you destroy them at once. It is very difficult to reconstruct again, and this is what Turkish government did. And this was maybe my last example to give you. As I mentioned, some of the original documents regarding the killings survived. In 1919 and 1921, I'm sorry, an Armenian intellectual published a book with the title of Great Crime, Metzvojire, and this book includes original Ottoman documents given to this Armenian intellectual, Aramandonian, by a Turkish bureaucrat, his name Naim Efendi. And Andonian published these official documents. And these documents include killing order. He published these documents you see on the left side of the screen. I mean, I read only one side, that the Ottoman government and the Committee of Union and Progress had decided to completely annihilate all Armenians living in Turkey. And no matter how tragic the methods of annihilation might be, their existence must be ended. This kind of telegrams, destroy the children and so on. This kind of telegram was published, and then in 1980s, Turkish government published a book claiming that an Ottoman bureaucrat, but the Naim Efendi never existed. You cannot have a memoir for someone did not exist, and the telegrams were supposedly sent by Talat Pasha. They are all fakes, and all this has been fabricated by this Armenian guy. And the telegrams that you saw there are claimed to be forgeries based on 12 grounds, and so on and so forth. Indeed, until 2015, we could not use this book, Aram Andonion's book, as you see the Armenian version, as an authentic book, original book, and the documents are authenticated. Because of these Talat Pasha telegrams book that is published by Turkish government, we could not prove until 2015 the existence of the person Naim Andonion. We could not prove the existence of handwriting of Naim Andonion, Naim Bey's. We could not really prove the authenticity of these telegrams, because they were very successful proving the wrongness of all these documents. I did only all this after 1915 with this book, Turkish Denialism and Killing Order. This is the reason New York Times in 2017 calls me Sherlock Holmes of Armenian Genocide, because I was able to show that the telegrams published by these Armenian intellectual, given to him by these Turkish bureaucrats, are original and authentic. So this is the way how Turkish denialism worked, and very successful. And maybe my last sentence, this is the reason denialism is a political struggle. It is not enough that we prove, that we show our documentation, and we should really consider this as a political fight. And so I will stop here. The question why really Turkey denies the Armenian genocide, it should be maybe in question and answer period. I think I talked too much, so Karen, you can take over now.
That was really powerful and very informative. And I appreciate your time and your energy today, because that really helped me understand a lot of different things as well. So I do want to invite others who have questions or comments. You can raise your hand. You can drop something in the Q&A, and we can definitely work on that. Sada, do you have something? Okay, so Linda's asking, what can we do to make them admit it? That's $1 million question.
Very simple, actually. How South African apartheid regime ended. Two basic ways. Domestic opposition against this authoritarian regime, against this apartheid regime, against this denialist regime that turned denialism into an institutionalized apartheid system. And secondly, international pressure. And this was how South African apartheid regime ended. And of course, we should continue the academic work. This is what we have been doing. I can now definitely tell you, when I started working on Armenian genocide 1990s, here in the United States also, we had this CNN strategy, CNN mentality, what I call. Always there are two sides. The argument that you never take in your mouth when it comes to Holocaust. You would never say there are two sides in Holocaust. We should be very objective and we should listen both sides. So when I started working on Armenian genocide, I was always hearing there are both sides of history. We should be objective. Turkish side, Armenian side, we should listen both of them. And this effect, I mean, CNN effect or CNN strategy, it is dead in academia. Today, I can assure you, because of all publication, not only mine, but several, I mean, there are dozens young Turkish academic. I have to proudly inform you about this. Dozen Turkish young scholars and Armenian scholar, young scholar. We really ended this so-called academic debate. In academia, nobody argues anymore that there are two sides of the story. Armenian genocide is on the same level with the Holocaust in that sense. Cambodia, Rwanda, and Armenia, these are the really Holocaust, four big, really traditional genocides that everybody take it as granted that happened. But still, Turkey continues to deny, and this is, I'm emphasizing on the political importance of the subject. We should support democratization in Turkey, because only a democratic Turkey can acknowledge this wrongdoing. And we should, of course, suppress or we should exert pressure on American government or other Europeans that make denialism of Turkish denialism as one of their agenda in their international politique, which is, I mean, very difficult. As you know, Turkey is a very powerful country, and not Europeans nor Americans, they are interested making denialism as a part of their policy when they come into relation with Turkey. So continuing political fight. This is, and education, of course. In education, this is the most important part. But in education, we should really develop a strategy that make it clear denialism is not only simply denying the factual part. It's more complicated than what we really think about it.
Yeah. Josie asked about your slides, and I believe you said you would share those with us later.
of course, with pleasure, because I haven't spoken about the part why Turkey denies the Armenian genocide. So,
Okay, so you guys can look for those in our follow-up email.
or I can tell them, I mean,
Yeah.
4 or 5 major important issue why Turkey denies the Armenian genocide. Number one is the continuity. Imagine Nazi Germany, after Nazi Germany, Germany established by Nazis. So Turkish Republic established by the same party that organized the Armenian genocide. Continuity. Same party organized the Armenian genocide, same party established Turkish Republic. So there is a continuity in the cadres. Those who established Turkish Republic, the founder of Turkish Republic, they were mainly an important number of them, not all of them, an important number of them were either murderers or thieves, plundered the Armenian properties. So it is very difficult. Number two, it is difficult to call your national heroes as murderers and thieves. This is the second important reason. Third, reparation and restitution. If you acknowledge the wrongdoing, you have to atone, you have to pay reparation and restitution. And this is the other very important problem for Turkey. Even it's not a genocide what happened. You call it, Turkish government or Ottomans sent the Armenians to Florida. It's a sunny, beautiful place compared to mountainous and cold Armenia. And still today, entire Turkey sits on Armenian wealth. So if Turkey acknowledged the Armenian genocide, then they should pay a monetary compensation. And the last reason is Turkey considered Armenian genocide and talking about Armenian genocide as a national security concern. Why? Because still today, there are Armenian organizations, politically maybe not important, or the question is not relevant, but these groups or individuals asking a territory of today's Turkey as part of Armenia as compensation. So if somebody comes to Turkey and says, the Western Armenia today, what Armenians called Western Armenia, and what we call today, it's called Eastern Turkey, certain provinces, if you say, if you acknowledge genocide, you should turn these territories to Armenia because this territory belonged to Armenia. And this rings the bell among the Turkish nationalists, saying that they demand territory and it is against our territorial integrity. And this is a national security problem because they demand territory from Turkey. And this is the reason it is not protected speech, genocide. There is a court decision, and court decision from 2007 says, since those who claimed the genocide at the same time claimed certain territories of Turkey, this is a national security concern, and this cannot be called as protected speech, period. So this is the reason that it is very difficult today to talk on Armenian genocide in Turkey.
Thank you. I'm going to do one more question before we move on, but I think the other questions that I don't get to right now, I think we're going to find those answers in the next segment. But I thought this was an interesting question. What are some of the skills or strategies you have learned about authenticating, yes, archiving, that we might be able to teach to our students so they can be Sherlock Holmes?
Very easily, if I can share my screen again, I will be able to show you with examples what these I want to show you. Oh, yeah, this is the best example. On the document, as you see, there are Arabic numbers. Okay, 4944, for example, this is with my cursor. And there are different numbers here. And on top of it, they already decoded these numbers. So Ottoman government during the war year sent these coded telegram to the provinces. And each 6 months or every year, they changed the coding system. And so you can, then they also sent to the provinces coding books that include these coding system. Now, today in Ottoman archive, you cannot find these coding books. We don't have. We know coincidentally from this telegram because the coding is already there. They changed the coding system as I'm mentioning you. And I went to Ottoman archive. Oh, another important information, Ottoman archive full of these kind of documents. Let me show you. This is, as you see here, this document is from Ottoman archive. As you see again, 5-digit numbers, 92459, for example. This kind of, and they already decoded because they wanted to read these documents. And we were not able to see these kind of documents until 2012. After 2012, they started putting these coded telegrams in the system. So what I did, I went into Ottoman archive and checked all these documents that these documents, there were around 20,000 documents for the time period that, for example, this telegram was sent in 1915. And I discovered that the coding system here that you see here, exact the same coding system that we have today in Ottoman archive. So I found several documents related to the same period with the same coding system. And they cannot then really prove otherwise. They have to accept the authenticity. And it was exact the same. As you see here, 3-digit numbers. And they say this is an L, and this is 37. And these numbers, coding numbers, they claim that they are not authentic. They made up these documents. And I was able to decipher these documents, showing that they used exactly the same coding system at the same period, and they couldn't have anything to say against this authentication method. This brought to the end. So in Ottoman case, Ottoman knowledge, language, and Ottoman knowledge, and the other painstaking, really working in archive, hours and hours, days and days to show that they use the same technique. It was not easy. I had to get help from other experts from Turkey because it's not always to decipher these numbers and letters here, as you see. And at the end, when I published the killing order, they couldn't say anything against it.
Wow, that is incredible. Like,
Yeah,
that's really amazing work.
this is working in a how do you call it, in a treasure and really digging and digging. This is like, to look in high in a big place. So
Yeah, that's wild. Thank you. I'm going to table the rest of the questions because I think we're actually going to be able to answer them as I go through my segment, but we will revisit them. So I'm going to move forward and share my screen, and I'm going to talk about the history of Artsakh. I got to pick the right one. Because I think that will tie in nicely to our conversation about denial and with some of the questions that you have really fit into this. So hopefully this works and we get into the right screen. Okay. So Artsakh is located in this area. over here, as this is present day Armenia running through here, but you can get an idea of how big the Kingdom of Armenia was over time. And so that's the purpose of this map, is to let you see that Artsakh has been part of Armenia over time. And I hope that the right screen is showing and not the wrong screen, but Sada will text me if it's the wrong screen. So if you haven't kept up with current events, there's been a lot of conflict over Artsakh recently. And it's important to understand that Artsakh is historic Armenia. So this Amaras monastery, this is an example of Artsakh's placed importance to Armenian history and identity. It's one of many historic landmarks. And this Amaras monastery is very important because, according to medieval chroniclers, Saint Gregory the Illuminator, who was the patron saint who brought Christianity to Armenia, founded this monastery at the start of the 4th century. At the beginning of the 5th century, Mesrop Mashtots, the inventor of the Armenian alphabet, established the first school here that used his new script that he had created. So this is really, really significant to Armenian culture and history. Moving forward in time, let's talk about kind of a more modern context. So the Treaty of Kars was signed by the USSR and Turkey in 1922, and it established the boundaries between Turkey and the areas previously under the Russian Empire that were now being brought into the Soviet Union. And this includes Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan. So major parts of historic Armenia previously within the Ottoman Empire, their populations, of course, were mostly murdered during the genocide, were not part of the new Soviet Armenia. So we call this eastern part of Armenia. It's a region known as Artsakh. And instead of putting it within Soviet Armenia's borders, the USSR instead created the Nagorno-Karabakh Autonomous Oblast and put it within Soviet Azerbaijan's borders and slightly separated from Armenia. Now, this tactic is carried out throughout new republics created by by the Soviet authorities, and this includes Nakhichevan, which you can see is to the lower left between Turkey and Armenia and Iran. It belongs to Azerbaijan, but you can see how it's kind of sandwiched in there. This strategy is part of Joseph Stalin's divide and conquer methodology, pitting different ethnic and national groups against each other so that they'll fight each other and not the Soviet government. Over the course of the next 70 years of the USSR, the Azerbaijan government carries out various policies of institutional discrimination against Artsakh and its Armenian population, pressuring Armenians to leave the region, such as holding back resources from Armenian populated towns, rerouting waterways, restricting education and media access, creating incentives for Azeri immigration to the region, things like that. So the Armenian population dropped from almost 90% to about 65 to 70% in the 1989. Ethnic tensions continued to build as Turkey continued its campaign of denial of the Armenian genocide throughout the 1900s. Azerbaijanis, who are Turkic people, followed Turkey's denialistic lead and spread anti-Armenian propaganda through the government-run media sources. As the USSR began to crumble, chaos emerged in many of its captive states. Having experienced the continual diminishment of their historic homelands, the destruction of the majority of their population during the Armenian Genocide of 1915, and the slower methods of ethnic cleansing within Soviet Azerbaijan, Artsakh Armenians felt their only hope for long-term survival was to reunite with Armenia. During the somewhat liberal period of glasnost under the Soviet leadership of Mikhail Gorbachev, Artsakh Armenians began calling for reunification. This set off a series of pogroms in Azerbaijan against Armenians living in Azerbaijan cities such as Sumgit, Kirovabad, and the capital of Baku. Hundreds of Armenians were killed and hundreds of thousands were driven out, evacuated, or in general just fled Azerbaijan for their own safety. At about the same time, the Soviet Union has begun to fall apart. So Armenia and Artsakh each declared their independence in 1991, as did Azerbaijan. Azerbaijani forces then launched a full-scale attack against Artsakh. But by 1993, Armenia and Artsakh gained control of this area and 7 other districts surrounding the enclave. The idea was to regain the connecting territory between Artsakh and Armenia and to control the zone to the east from which the Azeris had been launching their attacks. And this would potentially allow them to have a little bit of leverage for negotiating a peace deal. A ceasefire was brokered by Russia in 1994, and Artsakh developed into a de facto independent democratic republic, but it remains heavily dependent on Armenia. On September 27th, 2020, Azerbaijan, with the support of Turkey, attacked Artsakh. So this attack included jihadi mercenaries brought in by Turkey, Turkish weapons, Turkish officers and pilots, as well as Israeli and Ukrainian weapons provided by those governments, especially drones. These were all supplied to the Azeri military. After 3 months of heavy attacks, Russia brokered a ceasefire. Nearly 4,000 mostly young Armenian men were killed. And this is a huge percentage of the population, considering that the Armenian and Artsakh population is small, about 2 to 3 million. Artsakh lost 75% of its territory, with essentially only the capital city of Stepanakert remaining. This was a 44-day war of destruction for Armenia and Artsakh. Russian peacekeepers were installed, and the Armenian army was forced to remove itself from Artsakh. Artsakh's lifeline to Armenia had always been the narrow passageway of the Lachin Corridor. Back in 1989, Azerbaijan had blockaded this corridor for 3 years before Artsakh won the First Artsakh War and reopened the connection to Armenia. After the 2020 war, this 5-kilometer wide road was under Russian peacekeeper control. On December 3rd of 2022, the Lachin Corridor was initially blockaded by these so-called eco-terrorists who claimed that ecologically damaging mining was occurring in Artsakh, which was an unfounded accusation. These eco-activists were then joined by Azeri military personnel. These activists were a ruse as the Azeri government used as an opportunity to seize military control of the Lachin Corridor. Any Armenian who wanted to pass through to Armenia faced arrest by the Azeris. No goods were permitted in and out of Artsakh, and this includes food, gas, and medicine, and this is during the winter. This was a direct violation of the 2020 ceasefire, but Russia wasn't in a position to offer much intervention as it was embroiled in its own war in Ukraine. Several NGOs and nonprofits, as well as the Armenian diasporan community, raised concerns about genocide through starvation of the Artsakhi Armenians by the Azerbaijani government, but little was done to intervene in the crisis. In the spring of 2023, former ICC prosecutor Luis Moreno Ocampo labeled this blockade a genocide, but very little was done. On September 19th, 2023, Azerbaijan launched an anti-terrorist operation stating they would remove the Armenian army from Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh. This was the excuse President Aliyev used to seize Artsakh and is another step toward fulfilling Azerbaijan and Turkey's pan-Turkic geographic connection. Azerbaijan's major weapons supplier was and continues to be Israel, which seeks Azerbaijan's support in keeping tabs on Iran, Azerbaijan's neighbor. Aliyev's claims that his attack on Artsakh was an anti-terrorist operation is highly dubious. After 9 months of blockade and genocide, the people of Artsakh were starving. There was no evidence of any terrorist cells operating in Artsakh, and the Armenian army was not stationed in there in compliance with the 2020 peace treaty, nor was Artsakh a separate state, since it had been an autonomous oblast. Azerbaijan cannot reintegrate a territory or a people it never actually occupied. Turkish denial of the Armenian Genocide and Stalin's ideology of pitting ethnic groups against each other to maintain power have contributed to Azerbaijan's aggression toward Artsakh and Armenia. President Aliyev of Azerbaijan, who inherited the presidency from his father, is continuing to pit his people against the Armenians in order to unite Azeris against a common enemy and to maintain his hold on power. Now that the big goal of taking Artsakh has been accomplished, Aliyev continues his hate speech against Armenia by referring to it as Western Azerbaijan. The Azeris have created their own false narrative of history in which the Armenians do not exist on these lands. Instead, the churches and Christian artifacts are from those he calls the Albanian Christians, whom Azeris claim as their forebears. There is no evidence to support this claim, but when the president controls the media and education in the country, this is what becomes the truth for those who live there. Not only have Armenians lost their ancient homeland of Artsakh, Azerbaijan has pursued a policy of cultural genocide. This church, the St. Hovhannes Mikhich Church, was built by Shusha townsman Baron Hovhannes and Baba Stepanian Hovhannes in memory of their deceased brother Mikrich in the year of 1847. The church, also known as the Green Chapel, was damaged amidst the 2020 war. In the aftermath of the war, the Baku Diocese of the Russian Orthodox Church laid claim to the building and pledged restoration, but no restoration was ever undertaken. Over the course of several months in early 2024, the St. Hovhannes Mikhich Church was destroyed in direct violation of the December 7th, 2021 International Court of Justice case against Azerbaijan for committing cultural genocide. And you can see here these aerial photographs. It's very concerning that one of the most important and significant monasteries for Armenian history, language, and culture now lies in Azeri-controlled territory. Based on Azerbaijan's previous cultural genocidal actions, many are concerned that the Amaras monastery will not remain as it is. So this light green arrow, this arrow is called, so-called Zangezur region. This geographic region is in the Sunnik region of Armenia. Azerbaijan wants to cut through it to have direct access to Nakhchivan and to Turkey, completing that pan-Turkic vision they have. Their version of this corridor demands complete control over the transitway, with Armenia having no authority over its use. And you can see here, this is what Azerbaijan is actually wanting. Not a roadway, not a pathway, but they want control of the land and they want control of their shipments and not allow Armenia to have any autonomy or the ability to inspect these shipments. In January of this year, President Aliyev threatened the Zangezur corridor must and will be opened. The sooner they, Armenia, understand this, the better it is. I would still advise the Armenian side to weigh everything, including geopolitical changes in the world. Their close friends are being shamefully removed from the political scene. Trump is sending very clear, direct messages with his statements, and the vast majority of them are shared by Azerbaijani society. Therefore, hopes are high. So I want to take time now to go back to our questions that I know I had kind of tabled, but hopefully you are able to now kind of draw these connections between Turkish denialism and the genocide that happened and the forced removal of all Armenians from Artsakh. Denialism is a very real and very current problem for Armenians. Um, the Azeri government's destruction of the religious cultural significant sites is that they're not real, that they are somebody else's, they're not Armenian. And I thought it was really poignant when Dr. Akçam was talking about the way Turkey kind of reinvents its own history. This is what Azerbaijan is doing. They are inventing their own history to give themselves a longer legacy over these lands. That's not accurate. That's not real. Um, so, this is really concerning. Um, I want to hand this back over to Dr. Akçam if he has things that he would like to add or some insight concerning denialism and connecting Turkish denialism to Azeri denialism. Oh, yep.
Yeah. Let me share. I thought it is really good to show you. Let me open my, so that I can see. I think this one, yeah. I thought it is really good to read you two citation. One is from Talat Pasha, who was the main organizer of Armenian Genocide, 1915, and he was assassinated 1919 in Berlin. And the other quote I will read to you is from Enver Pasha, and it will really show you the continuity. The main thing that we have to keep in mind, there is a continuity from Ottoman government to Turkish Republic. The attitude towards Armenia hasn't changed. And this is from Talat in May 1918, when he was still on the power, the government. And this is, he says, I'm absolutely not in favor of the Armenians establishing a government. Okay? A small Armenian autonomous government will 5 years later become a 5 million strong Armenian state. It will dominate the Caucasus and it will become the Bulgaria of the East. I don't know whether you know this description. This is 1878, Russian-Ottoman War. At the end, Bulgaria emerged as an independent state, but Russia, even though Russia really make this state be established possible, but the Bulgaria turned to the British side. And it was always thought this is a wrong policy. It's a turn on the side. It is better really not to have this kind of state. And Armenia, in way back in during late Ottoman period, it's called the Bulgaria of the East. So it's a kind of a very easy national security threat to Ottomans also. So then the Talat continues, all the Armenians in Iran and America will gather there, and as you described, they will get every form of aid from the English, French, and in the future, they will move against us with the Christian Georgians and also with the great ease with the Persians. Therefore, were it possible, the best thing would be to launch the boil, I mean, to really eradicate it. Since it is not possible, it is necessary that Armenia be formed in an extremely weak and unviable form. This is what Turkey today tries to really establish in the region. Either there is no Armenia between Azerbaijan and Turkey, and if they cannot achieve this goal, which is possible, I mean, Trump cannot easily get the Canada or Greenland. Even, I mean, you can have this intent, but because of your strength and other reason you are not able, then you should really be formed as extremely weak state. This is Turkey-Azerbaijani strategy against Armenia. And it is the Enver at the same period of time, in my opinion, this is a very big mistake. He says, if today in Caucasus, a small Armenia possessing a population of 5 to 600,000 and sufficient territory is formed in the future, this government, together with the Armenians that will come mainly from America and from elsewhere, will have a population of millions, and in the east we will have another Bulgaria. So the same logic they are saying. And it will be a worse enemy than Russia, because all the Armenians' interests and ambitions are in our country. The Armenian wants the territory from Turkey. This is their fear. Consequently, in order to remove this danger, the formation of even the smallest Armenian government must be prevented. Land from the Muslim must not be given to the Armenians. Rather, to the contrary, I prefer that the Muslims occupy province such as Erivan. So this hasn't changed. This policy really is this. This is, for example, a statement from Turkish president on Karabakh conflict, July 14, 22. I highlighted only the. I mean, you can read the entire talk, but it says Turkey will never hesitate to oppose any such attack directed at the rights, laws, or lands of Azerbaijan, and they consider Artsakh as a natural, and then of course, the corridor that Kerry showed us, the Zangezur corridor, as part of Azerbaijan, and then Turkey, with whom it has an ancient ties with Azerbaijan, friendship and brotherhood. It's our binding duty to employ all our political, diplomatic, and social connections in the region and in the world. This is the strategic connection between Azerbaijan, and their strategy is, if not eradicate this state between Turkey and Armenia, it is better to weaken them as much as possible. And this is the policy of Turkey towards towards Armenia, and this is the really maybe the international cooperation between these two governments. Today, you may not know, Azerbaijan, Turkey are the main liferant of the oil to Israel. And this is the reason, never believe what Turkish president talks or speaks against Israel. This is the Azerbaijani-Turkey international connection that really gives all the oil to Israel. And it is like in Talat's speech. I mean, I'm fascinated, especially where he calls the Persia. It says that the Persian can come, the Christian Georgian, and also with the great ease with Persians. I mean, the Persians today, the Iran, is the only power indeed to come to try to help the Armenia, and where they are now in a process of signing a security agreement, Iran and Armenia. So as you see, history continues. Denialism continues. This is the reason that I call it as a structure. And today, this was the reason why Turkey organized this coup d'etat or military operation in Syria and toppled the regime in Syria because it was a pro-Iranian regime. As you see, really everything fits with each other, and Azerbaijan has the strongest ally in the region. This is Turkey, and their intent actually not to have this state Armenia between Turkey and Azerbaijan, and they are not strong enough. They cannot do it easily, and this is the reason they continue their denialist policies. And Armenia, unfortunately, does not have another choice but to find a really peace with these neighbors. This is the dilemma that the state Armenia faces today. And I mean, maybe I
Thank
have
you.
to add before, because you were
Yeah.
on, Gary. And the basic propaganda that Azeri is launching is that today's Armenia is Western Azerbaijan. This is number one. And the other important issue, as you mentioned, they also started developing a new historiography for themselves, and they claim that all Armenian churches in Karabakh and even in Armenia, they were not Armenian churches. Armenian distorted the writings on these church. These are all Caucasian churches. I'm sorry, Albanian churches. And there was indeed ethnic group Albanian in Caucasus way back in the history, and over the centuries, these Albanian people got assimilated among Armenians, Azeris, among other Caucasus people. Some were really converted in Muslim, some stayed in Christians, but they were along with Armenians there. And Armenians today, I mean, there is no need to argue, to make this as an argument. They had in the area their Armenian churches or the temples before Christianity. They are all there. And now the Azeri government claim there is no Armenians, there is no Armenian churches. They are all Albanian churches. And they started really distorting, and they attack now the churches. They say they are not destroying it, they are renovating it, and the renovation is really taking out the Armenian scripts from the walls and so on, and putting other things or covering up, saying that these are all Albanian churches. So this is the thing that I have to add.
Thank you. Yeah, it's something. It's really difficult, I think, sometimes to get my own mind wrapped around how people can do this, how societies can do this. And I know there's a couple questions related to teaching our students this. So I'm going to try to roll 3 questions into one and see if I can give you at least some answer. So with the post-witness era, we use a lot of survivor testimonies that have been recorded, and you can also bring in pictures of Armenians. We have a couple activities on our website that help humanize history. You can also use objects and the stories behind the objects if you're able to do that kind of research, or we have a couple lessons coming out that are humanizing objects to help tell the story of the genocide and of the people. And then embracing cultural pieces as well, and teaching about cultural identity of Armenians is a great way of connecting the past and the present. So those are some ideas I have for you. I can always stay on longer. I know that we're running out of time. I know that David asked about keeping this in our curriculum, keeping it fresh. And the thing is, it's if you have current events or you're able to teach current events in some aspect, this is a current event. Like what is happening right now is that Armenia is being threatened by Azerbaijan, and they're threatening to take Sunik, which is part of the southern territory of Armenia, forcibly. So this is very relevant. And Josie asked a little bit about Iran, and I am going to pose that a little bit more to Dr. Akçam because that's not really my strength. But it is interesting. I always think as an American learning about who is really providing the security right now is Iran, which is fascinating to think about these different alliances. But it comes down to access. Iran does not want to be cut off from Russia and the major trade access because Iran trades up through Armenia. And so they don't want to have to contend with Azerbaijan and Turkey, who they have a bit of a contentious relationship. But as far as it limiting Armenia's options for political alliances, ooh, that's a good question. So far it hasn't. So we'll see, I guess. I will turn that one over. Denialism in the age of social media, what you can do for students, which I think our students are probably better at this than some of us adults are. Always verify your source. Anytime you're studying the Armenian Genocide, it's really important to make sure you know what you're reading and who wrote it and where it's coming from. Because, I mean, if you just Google it, Turkish sources will come up or the Turkish government sources will come up and they're like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. And it's not really accurate, as we've learned. Also, you can do the same with the Azeri government sources. So being careful to to make sure that our students know, this is always check your sources and make sure you know where it's coming from. And thank you, Chris, that sugar cubes and doll stress, which are coming out soon. I keep saying soon. Nobody believes me anymore, I'm sure. But then our final question, well, actually, Dr. Akçam, I have two things left. I'm sure you weren't surprised to have New York Mayor Adams to learn about his being bribed by Turkey, to not mention the genocide of the Armenians, because Turkey's been bribing officials for a long time to do this, so it's not really a new thing. It's just that he really
Not
got
only
caught publicly.
not only the politicians, they really pour a lot of money into the universities. They try to gain their lost power within the universities. They try to establish chairs here and there. So, as I said, the fight with denialism, it's a political struggle, even within the academia.
Right. And do you have any do you have any thoughts about, will this alliance with Iran that Armenia is making, that it's deepening that alliance, will that have a negative impact on Armenia being able to pick up other alliances?
Not necessarily international politics, there is no morality. So the interest is the most important.
Oh my gosh. I'm
Nobody,
laughing, but it's so true, and I just appreciate
nobody
that you're
pays
so
attention with
direct
whom
with it.
you develop. I mean, today, I'm not going to really be surprised when Trump develops a deal with Iran, which, I mean, one of the options. Speculation is out there. There are different, I mean, interest is the major issue, and it might change. Now, with the recent development in the Middle East, there are new talks between Turkey and Iran, even though Turkey toppled the Assad regime in Syria, mainly helped Americans and Israel to kick out the Iran from Syria. Now they are negotiating for a get back and so on and so forth. So in international relation, really we should forget the morality. And Armenia is
Yeah.
a very weak position. It's a weak state. It's not a strong state, and they need really support from diaspora. And this is the job, or this is the task of people in Turkey also, I mean, like myself, to fight for a democratic Turkey and, of course, peaceful relation with its neighbors. This is very crucial. I mean, Turkish aggression towards its neighbor is a product of Turkish denialism, and we should fight against it. Again, I mean, we are going to end their politique is the determined. This is the reason that Hannah Arendt put the title of his article Politique and Truth. So the relationship between politic and truth. This is the major issue. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. I do want to share with our viewers that we have our final webinar in the series on March 26th. It's How Do We Remember, Commemorate, and Educate About Genocides in History? And it's going to focus on Genocide Awareness Months and teaching themes of remembrance and commemoration. We'll have another special guest, one of our 2024 Gen Ed Teacher Fellows, is going to join me, Kristen Hines, and she's going to talk about the project that she did in her classroom as a memorial exhibit that her students created. And also, Gen Ed is excited to partner with the Museum of Tolerance. So if you are in the LA area, we have 3 workshops on March 3rd, 4th, and 5th. These are all free. They are at the Museum of Tolerance, and we are sending information out about those soon, like tomorrow.
And I also just dropped it in the chat if you guys could see that, the link for it.
That's our fabulous setup getting us through. So I want to thank all of you for being here with us tonight. I especially want to thank Dr. Akçam for giving us all of this insight and wisdom, and now giving me lots of things to think about too. So we appreciate you spending your evening with us. Okay, have a good night, everybody.